We'll call the meeting of the Kerrville Economic Improvement Corporation to order. Maggie has agreed to provide our invocation this morning.
Lord, we just thank you for this time together. We thank you that we're able to meet and discuss and make decisions that will be beneficial for our community and our hometown. We pray that you'll be with us and everybody in the community, particularly as we roll into the holidays. Keep everyone safe and healthy. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Maggie. Next item on the agenda is the Visitors and Citizens Forum. Shelley, do we have anybody?
No, sir, no one signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is the minutes from the EIC meeting held on October 19th, 2020, which were included in your packets. Anybody have any comments or questions on those before I entertain a motion to approve them?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? None? Okay, if you approve, please raise your right hand. That passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda are the monthly reports. First is Mr. Salinas with the Kerr Economic Development Corporation update. Good afternoon, Gil.
Mr. Chair, members of the board.
And the rest of us.
Hold on, I've got a presentation coming up.
I was wondering what the
There
pregnant
it
pause
is.
was
Yeah.
for.
There it is.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll be doing a end of year report. I'm going to be providing some information on some of our deliverables, some of the strategies behind importing money into the community, and then our schedule for 2021 and now moving forward. Okay, so just to kind of put things in perspective, about a year ago, a little over a year ago this time, we were still under the KDC was under the chamber umbrella. Teresa had just made the move exactly a year ago from the chamber to the EDC. Visits to local companies as far as a brief program, that was non-existent. And look, I'll say the perception of the EDC, it took me a while to figure out, it wasn't very good. And then it's interesting because my first year that I was here now into my second year, person on the street, man on the street, that would kind of stop me and they're kind of like, young man, what are you doing in Kerrville? I'm like, well, it's economic development, it's a job, vision. And so it's like, no, I want to know what you're doing in Kerrville. So there was a little bit of apprehension as far as what we're trying to do at the EDC. Project Skymaster, we had just started that particular project, but it was not considered a priority. We're still trying to kind of feel it out, see where it was at. And then social distancing. Little did we know a year ago that 2-3 months later, we're going to get hit with COVID. We had no idea. Segueing into COVID, new normal, pivot, adjusting. I'm tired of hearing those terms. I mean, it's just been overused and what have you. At the EDC, we had pivoted and we adjusted during the COVID, right? So we reacted when we had to, but we were also pretty proactive. One of the things that we said, Teresa and myself, was as people start coming into the office and knowing that the chamber was going through a leadership transition as well, is whoever comes into the office, in our office at the chamber facility, we're in a position where we can't turn people away. I mean, people are getting hit very hard, business owners. So it's not in our scope to meet with small business, but we just have to do whatever we can in our power to help them or at least listen. So we did that. We were involved with the COVID community updates. The mayor spearheaded that. The city manager asked us to come in and provide some information, a little boost of confidence as far as what's happening in the community during COVID, as far as small business or local businesses. But we also spoke of the realities of business as far as there's going to be certain businesses that are not going to make it. So we had to be very upfront about that. We turned to our mentors. We made a lot of phone calls to mentors for myself, Teresa as well. It's like, well, what are you all doing? What do you all suggest? And then crisis management. We implemented our crisis management plan. And look, I'll tell you, I mean, there was no handbook to deal with an actual pandemic. So that's something that we had to basically write as we were going through that whole process. So again, we were proactive and we didn't wait for the bottom to fall out as far as COVID was concerned. The roadmap that we provided about a year ago, which was a 2-year roadmap, here are the different 7 sections of that. So I'll be going into each one of those and talking about what it is and then the deliverables for each one of those sections. Business retention expansion, which is a program designed to really work with local industry. And when I say with local industry, it's your top 20 employers, top 10 to top 20 employers, which typically are the ones that create a lot of the money that's coming in from the outside. Again, that was non-existent, so we were able to start working on that particular program. Teresa did a fantastic job in launching that particular program. We issued a couple of business surveys, which were very well. That's one thing in Kerrville that I found out, that people really like to be engaged. So the ones that we sent out, that we had a huge positive return on those. The Over the Fence podcast, that was specifically designed during the pandemic for local businesses. And then the Industry Roundtable platform. We're now getting ready to have our 4th Industry Roundtable with our top employers, where we're having those meaningful discussions. We've started building some very good relationships with the SBA. And again, the deliverable here is we created this portal for local industry, specifically the primary job generators. The other section is human capital and workforce. And as you can see, we hosted several influencers or movers and shakers within the state as it pertains to workforce. And the deliverable there again is we access funds for several local companies, and I'll elaborate on that here in a bit. On the entrepreneurial side, we had the 40 Under 40 campaign, which I know Teresa and I were originally going to do this until next year, but when the pandemic hit, we're kind of like, this might be something that'll help us boost confidence at the local level, business-wise. And look, I'll be honest, I was a little concerned. I was like, are we going to have 40 businesses or entrepreneurs that are under 40 that are going to actually apply? I mean, I hate to be in a position where we have 20 out of 40, right? And Teresa's like, no, we can do it. I'm like, all right. So lo and behold, we had a little over 100 responses. And so we had an actual competition. So those 40 under 40, very popular. People really loved that. And that was a segment that's also helped us with the Over the Fence podcast, identifying some of those entrepreneurs. We also hosted some webinars for local businesses. The small business series, that's actually something that we're going to have in person with the Office of the Governor in April, but because of COVID, we had to do that one virtually. So that one was attended by 4,500 businesses in the Hill Country. And that's like, I'm doing the math here, that's like, what, 1/5 of our community's population. So it was very, very well attended. Obviously, we partnered with the Office of the Governor, so it was getting our name out there as far as working with local business, and then KerrvilleTogether.com during COVID. That was a great way to support a local business. So again, the one deliverable here is we planted the seed, and we identified a young batch of entrepreneurs. And now, they don't know this, but we're now going to ask them to kind of step it up. It's like, all right, the 40 under 40, there's a lot of things that we need to start working on here in Kerrville. And you all are the ones that are going to have to step up to a plate to start carrying that baton. On the marketing side, there was a lot of, we weren't very proactive in the sense of developing an actual marketing program. That's something that we said that we're going to schedule for 2021. But because of Killdeer, we received a lot of earned media articles through that. And it also helped us launch some of the webinars and podcasts that we have. Also on the marketing side, which was free, is we've been a panelist for we were a panelist for the IADC annual conference. So we're actually asked to come in and talk about the Killdeer project, an aerospace discussion. We've been a moderator for 2 national webinars. Again, small business webinar. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a podcast interview with a prominent site selector, great national exposure, where we plugged Kerrville in. And as a result of that, we've been asked to now speak at an economics conference, which is attended by a lot of site selectors and corporate executives. And basically they said, look, we want you to come in and tell your story about a rural community landing a deal such as Killdeer. And originally my thoughts like, wow, we're not really rural. We're quasi-rural, suburban, but sure, we'll take it. So we're gonna have that opportunity to tell that story. And again, this is more on the earned media as far as getting some of these proactive coverage of our community by all these different media entities. Now, the one article that I like to point to, and we had, I think at the previous meeting, or 2 meetings ago, we had a list of all the different media entities that covered the project. The one that I'm proud of, obviously all of them are, right? But the one that really gains a lot of attention is the Area Development Magazine. That magazine is highly read by corporate executives, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, site selectors. The fact that we had an article printed in that magazine speaks volumes. Now, moving into our marketing in 2021 and for the next few years, I'll rewind 1 year ago. A year ago, if I was a corporate executive and somebody would approach me about Kerrville, first thing I would do is like, okay, sounds interesting. Let me look at what Kerrville has. They type in Kerrville, business, economy, projects, so on and so forth. You get a hodgepodge of news here and there, nothing real substantial. Matter of fact, a couple little negative things, right? So a corporate executive would be like, okay. This article from this prominent magazine and all the other ones that have been coming out, we're able to now work this and do it for the next 3 to 5 years. So it's times 5. Now we start developing an economic development or an economic news bank where when we walk in to meet with one of these corporate executives from a Fortune 1000 company, and we're able to come in and say, we're with Kerrville, so on and so forth. And I've seen this happen in the past. And they say, you know what? I just read something about Kerrville in such and such magazine or publication, to a certain extent, the Wall Street Journal. And sounds pretty interesting. Sounds like you all have something, good happening there. So when you're able to walk in and they're already doing the pitch for you, I mean, that's half the battle. So that's the strategy that goes into developing this proactive business news bank for our community. Okay, moving on to other sections, we have the stakeholder communication, organizational housekeeping. Really what this is stakeholder communication. We're communicating with our different entities and where we can, doing our one-on-one visits with our stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, there's 35 of them. That's our EDC board, EIC, county, and city. Organizational housekeeping, there's been some work in getting our policies and procedures and basically just doing everything that we have to do in order to run an efficient operation. So the deliverable is reporting and efficiency for the organization. And for EDCs or EDOs like ourselves, this is where the rubber meets the pavement. At the end of the day, it could be the person on the street or one of our stakeholders. They'll ask us, great, you got an article in Area Development Magazine, you did this, you did that, but I want to know what are the deals that you worked on. So last year, coming into this fiscal year, we worked 13 prospects, actual projects, and you've got all the names there. And we've touched on this in some of our meetings here with this board. And of those, we actually closed on 3 deals. Obviously, SkyMaster, which is Killdeer, is the biggest one that we worked on, so we are all very familiar with that one. Tin Roof is a Prime Metals facility that's located on Harper Road, and that is considered one of our top employers because they are a manufacturing operation. So they're contributing to our GDP, hence that's why they're on our list. And then the other one is, and we're on a support role in that one because they were already looking to come into the area. So we just fostered the entry of their operation into Kerrville. And then the other one is Project Vista, which is OWLE. It's on the other side of the county line, and the reason I like to include this on the list is because Big Brother, which is a San Antonio Economic Foundation, they approached us and said, hey, we need some help. We need you to see if you can help Bernie out with a particular project. And then a prominent site selector out of New York City called us up, which is the one that was working the project, and said, we've got this project. It's going to benefit Kerrville. Can you help with the information? Absolutely. So the deliverable there we introduced new investments into Kerrville, and we have some projects that are still active in our pipeline. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm driving up to Dallas to meet with one of those projects that's specifically for the airport area. That's, well, it's looking pretty good, so we'll find out more tomorrow. So just to recap, here are the different sections and the deliverables for each one of those sections. Again, creating that portal, we access funds for the human capital, our entrepreneurs. On the marketing side, we really haven't ratcheted that initiative up yet, but we will now moving into 2021. Communication, the organization, and then on the recruitment side. Okay, so now covering the other three areas. So I'll have some people, and I've had some people ask me, okay, you all have worked on projects, so on and so forth. Apples to apples, we want to know, this is a budget that you had, and how much money did you actually create in the community? So the way I like to look at it is, okay, if you want to do apples to apples, our budget was $400,000 for last year, which really was $340,000, I think, because we had volunteered a budget cut when COVID happened. If you look at all the different funds that we brought in from the state, Skills Development Fund, that's Killdeer, and then All Plastics. The Texas Enterprise Fund, which is a big one, as the governor's fund that's used for recruitment of projects, and that was for Killdeer as well. The Veterans Hiring Program, Texas Enterprise Zone, that one's to be determined, and that's also for Killdeer. And then we've got pending programs with Prime Metals, James Avery, and Project Gulf. So if you look at that, it's about $1.5 million that we brought in, facilitated and bringing in to companies that are in Kerrville that ultimately are going to go into either training or hiring employees in Kerrville, which ultimately goes into the pockets by way of salaries that are generated for them. So it's 1.5 million versus 340,000. So that's, again, doing the apples to apples comparison. Not including the economic impact and the jobs that all these projects are going to create. Now, the other thing that I would like to point out, I have to be very careful how I say this, is the intangibles. The relationships that we've built in the last year and a half, some that I've carried over from my previous place of work, and then also new ones that we've created. And it's interesting, I said this at the KDC board meeting, is one thing, and it never happened where I was working down south, meeting with people at the governor's office and reintroducing myself, Kerrville, so on and so forth, Alamo College is at their main campus in San Antonio, and they're like, you need to work projects, you need to do something because we want to go for a day visit or a 2-day visit to Kerrville, Basically they said, we want to go and visit the community, and see what you have, and, they're all very familiar with Kerrville. And that was in the Valley, they weren't asking for that. They were like, okay, we'll find it in our time, in our schedule, right? They really want to be here in Kerrville. So that was kind of like, all right, that's a leg up for us in how to promote our community. So we've built those relationships. And then the other one was, I alluded to this at the beginning, which was, I was asked, when I first started working here is, what are you doing here? Why are you in Kerrville? It kind of took me aback. But my response was like, just watch me. It's good. It's watch what we're going to be doing. It'll make sense a year to 2 years down the road. So it's that change in mindset. We're now starting to see where the community is kind of coming out and saying like, okay, we see what economic development is. We get it. Now they're kind of like, well, we want more. I'm like, well, hold on. There's a whole process, right? So the relationship building, and again, you can't put a dollar value to that. And then the change in mindset. And that's really the exciting part, that we can now really, moving forward, we can really start working on some very nice projects. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up here. Our schedule for next year, here's some of the events and programs that we have. Our fourth quarterly industry roundtable is going to be on December 15th. So we're going to have our top 15 employers there, which are our primary job generators. So it's not commercial and retail are not included in that one. So those are our top employers, and between those 15 that are going to be there in attendance, they represent about 6,000 plus employees in the Kerrville area. and they represent about almost 50% of the GDP in the area. And the fact that they've been able to start now coming together on a quarterly basis and having meaningful discussions, now we can start really moving forward. And when we're courting prospects and new companies, that's the first thing that they're gonna ask us. Can we meet with some of your top employers? Now we have that. We're gonna have a reception for the 40 Under 40 Rising Stars. That's on December 10th. We're looking at a Innovation and Business Forum. That's gonna be in May, and that's gonna be our State of Economic Development event. Where we're gonna be able to come out and start talking publicly as far as what are some of the things that we're working on. And then our stakeholder retreat, June. So we'll be doing that again with all of our 35 stakeholders. And again, ongoing are the webinar series, monthly podcast, marketing and recruitment. We're looking to start unveiling a campaign in the spring. It's going to be for target sectors, a very targeted approach for some of the companies that we're going to be going after, and specifically now really working with our newest corporate citizen, which is Killdeer. It's like, okay, we know they've got suppliers in California and the state of Washington. Now having access to those and really start working on some kind of a mission to work with those suppliers. Okay, so that is my part of the report. Teresa's gonna come in and talk a little bit about the performance matrix, which is what you have in your hands, and which is a report that we're gonna be using now on a monthly basis, so we're able to track projects and activity every month, and that way there's no surprises at the end of the year. Before I turn it over to Teresa, any questions for me?
One question, do you have all the resources you need to do all these projects you've got underway?
At the moment, we do. Once we start on our marketing campaign, we might be coming back for an ask, not a huge ask, but some kind of an ask to start developing that marketing program. Yes, sir.
Do you foresee any companies in the future, I mean, in the near future, 6 months, that may want to express a more hot interest in Kerrville? I know you're going to Dallas tomorrow.
Yeah, that's one of them. 6 to 12 months, I'll put it in that time frame. And again, that's why the Killdeer project was so important, because when they're towards the top of the pyramid, as far as supply chain, they start telling all the other ones that are underneath them, it's like, we need you at X location, for supply chain, logistics.
Has any of those contacted you yet?
We're working with one right now, but we have not really marketed to all of them yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still in the process of making sure that Killdeer is up and running in our community.
Okay.
Gil, I have a question. I had a chance to work recently with Bernie Kendall County EDC on a project, and was kind of just comparing and contrasting how they do things versus how we do things. And with the new attention that's on Kerrville because of Killdeer and the other projects that you mentioned, and also just talking to local businesses through the retention program, how big of a deal is it, or how much emphasis do you guys place on the fact that we have a 4B community here? So we have all these resources available to us that other communities like Bernie don't have. Is that a big deal or a big selling point?
Yes, the companies that are a little bit more savvy, that understand how incentives are worked, and that's where site selectors come in. They're the ones, they, hands down, they know exactly how the state of Texas works. A 4B is there's differences, there's pros and cons for each one, but the 4B, the best way I can put it is, a 4B is basically a 4A on steroids. A 4B gives you a lot more flexibility to work with projects as opposed to a Type A. A Type A is a lot more restrictive.
Well, and just comparing to Bernie that doesn't have either, they're almost entirely dependent at their EDC on membership dues that businesses pay, whereas you guys are funded more through this group here, through 4B.
That's when you don't have either or, that's a tough one. Yes.
I just think it's good to emphasize that we have that in Kerrville as a kind of a selling point.
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge, and that's look, that's part of the reason I'm here. When you have a structure like that, it just makes it easier for you to be able to recruit prospects, as opposed to, you'd be surprised how many communities don't have either or. And if they have a Type A, it's a lot more restrictive.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. All right, so I'll have Teresa come in and do the next part. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Nice to see everybody. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I feel like this matrix is pretty self-explanatory. We just wanted to be able to provide you some kind of a format that you would have hard, fast numbers every month, and you kind of see where we were on a monthly basis in comparison to where we projected on our matrix by the end of the year. A couple of things I would like to point out in talking about that marketing plan that we're going to be beefing up into 2021. You'll see there are some parts of that with an updated labor shed study, as well as some an overall return on investment or impact for the organization. So that will become part of what we utilize in our marketing and branding and recruiting efforts towards these site selectors and larger companies. The other part of this is looking at those quarterly roundtables and how they coincide with our webinars. There will be information that we can disseminate to the community coming out of those roundtables that we'll then put into format of a webinar, again, for our regional partners as well as our community. And then the 40 under 40, which we're really excited, again, to be able to share with the community and have a regional participation in that. There are some rebranding efforts happening within our organization. The one that is probably seen foremost right now is with the Economic Dialogue podcast. So we've gone from Over the Fence to Economic Dialogue, where we're really gearing and focusing a lot more of those discussions with economic development professionals, our resource partners, our regional economic development organizations. So you'll see a little bit of a difference in shift in conversation with those. And so that was really the first one that we decided to rebrand and move forward on. So, any questions?
Thank you guys both very much for your innovation and creativity and lots of good work. Appreciate the update.
And if I could say one more thing, I just think they've had a wonderful year, obviously, during a very difficult time. But I think also it's really good news that we've achieved stability with Gil. We have a new, much longer contract that's been signed, and we are delighted about it. KEDC has done a good job. I think the board and the small group that worked on it with Gil has done an excellent job securing our future, because as he said, one of the bad raps on us a long time ago was no consistency. We were always changing people, changing programs. Well, now we've got it, and it's good, so we just need to ride it forward for the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, item 4B on the agenda is the Kerrville Economic Improvement Corporation project status update, which was included in the packet. Mr. Hoppy?
Chairman Richards mentioned, we did include the latest project status report in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
None? Okay, thank you.
Very good.
All right, Ms. Dozier, we're ready for item 4C, the monthly financial report.
All right, afternoon. I'm going to get through a few items here, so I'm going to be doing the next 3 items, and we'll start with the financial update for the month ended October 31st. So this is the first month of our new fiscal year, and I'm going to start with just kind of going through the financials for the month. You'll notice that the current period is the same as the year-to-date, since this is the first month of the year. So starting off with sales tax, we received sales tax of $312,000 in October 2020. That's 5.6% higher than October of 2019. You may remember that we were budgeting for 6% less than the previous year. So definitely better than budget and continuing to outperform. This represents taxes on sales that actually occurred in August. And we saw strong performance from our 2 largest categories, retail and manufacturing. On the retail side, home improvement, big box, online retailers continue to show strength. But the really amazing thing here is that one of the city's largest retailers did not pay in October. We didn't receive a payment from them. Instead, we received 2 payments from them in November. So even missing that large retailer payment, we're still up, and we were still up in the retail category. So very impressive. We just, at the end of last week, because of the Veterans Day holiday, it came a little bit late, but we received our November sales tax payment, and it's crazy. It's up 25% compared to November of 2019. 25%.
Thank you, COVID.
And, yeah, and even when
It's a
I
sick
adjust out that double payment, you know, if I take that out and say, okay, what about if that didn't occur, we're up 18%. So just unbelievable. We've requested the detail by taxpayer, but we have not received that yet. I'm hoping we'll receive it by the end of this week. So there'll be more to come on analysis as far as particular retailers that may be causing that increase. But certainly, you know, not what we were expecting, but good news. Let's see. Moving on down the income statement here. On the expense side, just a few things to note. So we had normal monthly expenses for administrative services. We had a quarterly payment to KEDC and monthly payment for debt service. And then the only project expenditures that we had during the month of October were for the Doyle School. And they seem to be making good progress. We are consistently getting payment requests from them for architecture fees and their fees for their portable buildings, getting everything set up there. So it looks like they're making good progress there. So we ended the month with almost 167,000 in expenditures and a net of revenues over expenditures of 145,000. Looking forward on the cash flow statement, this is our cash flow forecast. So we'll get into this a little bit more when we're talking about that potential prepayment on the KPUB loan. But you can see the bottom line here is very strong. The fiscal year 2021 projected numbers on the sales tax side, I'm using our budget as the projection. So just take note of that because we haven't been hitting our budget. We've been, you know, coming in better than budget. But what's shown here is budget. On the project expenditure side, a couple of things to note. On the Thompson Drive Partners, we actually are going to have a payment going out to them this week for they've met all of their requirements for their phase 2 payment, and it looks like they'll be wrapping that project up in the first quarter of 2021. So that phase 3 payment, the last and final payment I have listed there. On the airport projects, I just have 33,000 listed here, so you know, sounds like that could be subject to change. The project agreement is for more than that, but things have kind of slowed down right now. And then the rest of these are pretty much the same as what you've seen before. But looking at the bottom line there, you know, the low here is 2.3 million, and that's if sales tax comes in at budget is what we're looking at there. And then the last page here just shows a little bit of analysis on, you know, sales tax by month, also on these projects, what's left on the committed projects that we have, and then our investment and the cash. So all of the EIC money still is invested in that completely liquid tax pool account, but it is now down to 18 basis points on the interest. So so not earning too much there. Any questions on the monthly financials?
I had one question, going back to your statement of activities. What's the ballpark on, would you go back to that screen?
Yes.
What's the ballpark on our, what do we add to cash reserves monthly once you back out administrative debt service, not counting projects? It looks like if we're at 145 for our current month, If you add back the Doyle School payment and adjust for the quarterly payment to KEDC, is that number somewhere between 150 and 170?
For the net, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, probably more like 170, 175, something like that. Depends on how you want to divide out those quarterly payments to KEDC.
Okay.
They are just paid once a quarter, but if you want to kind of average it monthly, you could look at it like that as well.
Okay.
But yes, that is, the month of October, sales tax was coming in better than budget. So when you're looking at the forecast, just note that those numbers are budget numbers. So if sales tax continues performing, then it'd be closer to what you're talking about. There is seasonality in sales tax, so that will change the bottom line. Because we receive sales tax on a 2-month lag. February is our largest sales tax month that has December sales. So there is some seasonality there to take into account, but that's a ballpark figure that's
Okay,
reasonable.
thank you.
The airport projects may be not moving forward at all, so that number is not going to be,
The 33,000 that I have in there is what Mary had talked about last month when she presented, and this is just like the tear down expense.
right?
But it doesn't include.
I'm talking about the whole
anything additional.
225 that was set aside for them.
Oh, right.
We're not going to get into that very far, does it sound like, based on what she told us?
Right, yeah, right, and let's see, we've paid, so far, EIC has paid a little over $7,000 for some asbestos mitigation removal, and then we're estimating another $33,000 for the EIC portion of the tear down, and then that's all that I have showing up at this point. But that is less than what the project agreement is for, funding
Right.
agreement is for. All right. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Ma'am.
Okay. Let's see. So next up we have a budget amendment. This is actually just a housekeeping item. We presented the same sort of thing to council last week. So the way that the EIC budget works, you'll remember that we're actually doing the budget like during the summer for the coming fiscal year. And we only budget for funding agreements that are actually signed and in place, which obviously makes sense. You don't want to try to budget for something or that you haven't signed. So, but then during the year, other projects come up, and those projects are approved by EIC. They're also approved by City Council, and then expenditures are made. This is just what I'm asking for is just kind of a year-end housekeeping item to officially amend the budget for projects that were approved and partially paid in 2020, but were not part of the original 2020 budget. And so you'll see a piece of paper at your place that looks like this with some yellow highlighting on it. So these 3 projects listed here came up during the year 2020 after the original budget was approved. And so I'm asking if EIC can actually take official action to amend your 2020 budget after the fact to account for the spending on these 3 projects. And that's the airport projects, $7,000, Doyle School, $114 almost is what was spent in 2020, and then Killdeer, $1.8 million is what was actually spent in 2020.
So if we don't approve it, your budget's gonna be unbalanced forever. That'll drive you crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know. I was
Worse
thinking
than
about that. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
I think I might talk to our city attorney about like, is there a way to, do this in one step? He's shaking his head, and so.
The
Anyway, so
law
I'm
is the
coming back
law,
to
right,
y'all
Mike?
asking for a asking for just an approval. It doesn't require an official resolution or ordinance on the EIC side, but it does require an actual vote to amend
So
the
it
budget.
needs a motion and a vote.
a motion and a vote, yes, for these 3 projects listed here.
This is for last fiscal year.
It's for last fiscal year, and so this is a year-end cleanup kind of thing. So right now, we're officially in the process of closing our books and doing our audit and doing our financial reporting, and so that's why we're bringing it back to you.
Well, we
at this
never
time.
expected the budget to be exactly right when we made it.
Correct,
Never is, because the projects, we don't have them
So,
on our
and we
budget.
approved all these things already.
correct.
Right.
So I don't
Yes.
understand why we have to.
It's kind of a belt and suspenders kind of thing, because,
It's a law, right? I mean, it's a state law. We can't, she can't spend money that's not in the budget, so we've got to amend this budget to balance what she spent, or she gets to go to jail.
We've already approved these.
you've already
You gotta change- it's
approved,
just-
right, and you've already approved the project agreement, you've, approved the funding agreement, city council has approved it, you've seen the presentation of it every single month, but it requires a separate action to actually amend the budget.
Is this what you call bureaucracy?
Real close. Very close.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we're spending taxpayer money is the idea here, so,
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment.
I second.
We got one question.
Yes.
Should, on the Olympic Drive, was the $894, was that the total amount that was spent? I mean, do we need to address that, reduce the budget by that $41,000 so that zeroes out?
Up later.
yeah, I think actually, I believe that amount was spent in the previous year, so that it was just a timing difference between years. So the project itself came out to the right amount, but the split between years was a little bit off. So we spent less in 2020 and more in 2021.
We don't have to approve that.
No. You don't have to approve it if you're spending less, only if you're spending more.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate your approval by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. All right, last thing from me. This is at the request of the EIC board. Y'all had asked to discuss the K-Pub loan. So as you'll remember, in September 2020, the city borrowed $1 million from K-Pub to help fund incentives for the Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing Project. EIC agreed to fund that debt service. The loan is structured as an interest-only loan for 4 years with a balloon payment of $1 million in 2024. It's also structured so that voluntary prepayments are allowed at any time. And so I'll open the floor to discussion about if EIC might be interested in looking at any prepayments given the current cash situation and the fact that sales tax has been coming in ahead of budget.
We talked, I think, in our last meeting about including this on the agenda. Does anybody have any thoughts about proposing an advance pay down on this loan?
Yeah, I'm in favor of, just like we do now, we have a debt service category. We ought to put this in a management category, but I think we ought to have some latitude in case we wish to stop that. So I'm assuming we can do that if we say, let's start paying down $20,000 a month for a period of time, and then look at it every 6 months? Is that the way to do that, Mike?
Yeah, the way that, and Mike can respond as well, but my understanding from reading the loan agreement is voluntary prepayments are allowed at any time. And there's, we don't have to provide notice or get approval or anything like that, just voluntary prepayments are allowed at any time.
I would propose we look at it that way, pay $20,000 per month right now as we see. In the next several months, I think Kerrville's gonna be very strong on the sales tax side. So I see, we don't have any other things in front of it at this point. So I would say we move forward for 6 months, pay $20,000 a month.
And you'll remember that this loan is at 2% and, we're currently earning 18 basis points.
So, Gil's talking to other people, and we think we may be able to build on, Killdeer coming here.
Don't want to burn all the money.
Yeah, and so you're just thinking we can chip at it a tiny bit and then, because it'd be kind of good to keep our powder dry.
Yeah.
For some other projects that may come down the road. It might take some real money.
And I think my concern was I didn't want the EIC board 4 years from now to go like, great, you dumped $1 million. Now, you didn't pay anything down. You didn't make any
we've also
planning,
got, if
you
we're not
didn't
gonna
plan
spend
on
money
how
for
we
the
were gonna pay
airport.
this down, it's just now we've got $1 million hit on our budget, and I don't think that's fair for future EIC. That we ought to at least either have an amortization schedule, whether it's 20 a month, I don't know what that number is, but,
I'm not against it, I'm just making sure, you know, because I do think we maybe don't want to get, and we might decide, you know, if nothing happens with, you know, more things going on at the airport or whatever, we might just go ahead and pay the darn thing off. But
pay the
that's
thing
what-
off. That's absolutely right.
But we also have the money, the 225 that's budgeted that we're probably not gonna pay anyway at the airport. So we could certainly pay, we could pay that money and be in the same budget position we were gonna be in anyway by the end of the year.
And Amy, just to be clear, there's no early payment penalty or anything,
That's correct. There's
And-
no penalty.
but
for
we
early
would save the interest money if we had it paid off early. Gotcha.
Mark, I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I like the idea of setting aside. I think it's still kind of early. There are some projects percolating at the airport that are real. And I think that Kent makes a good case about keeping powder dry. And the other thought would be that on a monthly basis is a little bit, it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
Maybe, you know, your timing of your payments are twice a year, March and September, maybe look at it then with the idea that maybe you do a larger payment in March than the 20,000 and then a larger payment in September if things look good.
So if we pay 20,000 for the 6 months, we'd be looking at, you know, a couple $100,000, which that's where we should be trying to, you're saying in 6 months, do it every 6 months, look at making a payment.
so we might,
We just don't lose sight of that money.
well, we can go ahead and instruct staff to put it on the March agenda.
Yeah.
Which I think that might be a wise thing to do, and then look and see what our cash position is, we might want to make a $250,000.
More than that, yeah.
Yeah,
And I would put it on the February agenda.
So, yeah, so we could address it
yeah,
in
so it'd
March.
be ready, and we could make it at the same time as our $10,000 interest.
Plus you'll know what your
payments due
December sales tax is. by
Right.
then.
Right, and that's the
be a
big,
good time.
Well,
to
it'd
get-
be
That's gonna make the big
$500,000 by
difference.
then,
Yeah.
the way things are
Yeah.
going.
Well, if we take the $1 million and divide it by the 4 years, you're at 250,000. If you divide that by month, you're at about 20,800 and change.
That's right.
So I'd be good with putting this off till March and just knowing that, you know, that's kind of our
Target.
target.
It is to, you know, try to keep pace with it so that we're not handing a balloon payment over somewhere down the road.
Okay, well, I will make sure that it's on the February agenda. then
Great.
discuss at that
Okay,
time.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is the concept and feasibility study for an extension of the river trail from G Street to downtown Kerrville. Copy?
Good afternoon. Got a very brief presentation for you. Just a little bit of history and timeline. We've had a successful ongoing partnership between the city and the EIC in deploying now 6 miles of river trail stretching all the way from the Dieter Center over to Kerrville Shriner Park, and then the most recent 1 mile extension from G Street over to Shriner University, which, as you all know, just opened up this last September. The Kerrville River Trail Master Plan was updated in July 2019 to include a downtown section that goes essentially from that G Street trailhead over to the bridge at Tranquility Island. And that was just conceptually kind of penciled in, no particular alignment that was shown there. This summer, you all provided direction to staff to make sure to include $50,000 for a concept feasibility study within this year's budget, the fiscal '21 budget. And we have developed a preliminary scope of work for that concept study. This shows you, again, just the rough overall master plan concept that was approved by City Council and the Parks Advisory Board in the 2019 timeframe. You can see the red is all of the existing trail, a number of red sections that were concept pieces. At that time, the Shriner extension was just a concept, but we were able to knock that out, which we're all very pleased with. And then you can see in that blue area is one of the big new additions for this master planning effort, and that is that downtown extension. So the concept feasibility scope that we've developed at this point with Hewitt Engineering is essentially site visits and data collection, identifying ownership along that that section of riverfront, Evaluating the trail alignment alternatives, there are a number of pretty significant topographic challenges, perhaps more than we've seen in any of the other areas, particularly as you get closer to the downtown core. The feasibility of various sections that may require either some cantilevered approaches or actually moving into some of the riverbed areas. Again, there's a number of challenges there, so this is it's going to be a little bit of an engineering feat in figuring out where to have some potential alignments. Evaluating options for both the lower and upper trail sections potentially, as well as some phasing of those different trail sections. And then determining locations. There's a number of drainage elements that are going to have to be crossed in some form or fashion, probably some low-level bridge elements. And then just the basic constructability and access issues for a contractor to be able to access those various points. Performing natural resource constraint analysis, as well as some preliminary cursory cultural resource evaluation, and then kind of wrapping that all together with some project phasing, obviously, and some engineer's estimates.
Sounds like more than $50,000.
Well, we've got a great engineer, done quite a few other sections with us.
Sound like you're prepping to tell us
that's a
this is gonna
lot
be a
of-
really
that's a lot of
expensive
analysis.
segment of the trail.
Don't say that in front of them.
So next steps, if you guys did want to move forward, would be to direct us to fully develop a funding agreement with the city. We would take on that scope and that contract and manage that for you all. We could bring that forward as early as you want us to. Potentially, the next regular meeting you all have is December 21st, which we also want to make sure that you guys want to have a meeting on December 21st. Fine by us, but that's the week of Christmas, so may need to provide us a little guidance on that as well. And then, we could bring it forward from there to council in the January timeframe.
Is that funding agreement for the 50,000? Or is it an amount to be determined?
Yeah, so the way we would propose it right now is that it would be not to exceed 50,000, and that way we've got the ability to utilize that if we need to change some scope along the way. That we can certainly do that, but we think we can accomplish that for that amount, not to exceed.
Yeah, this is for the concept plan for that entire blue dash line that goes all the way from G Street to the Riverside Nature Center? Is it?
No, sir, from the Tranquility Island Bridge to G Street.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And what portion of that is, you notice you mentioned two different trail levels, an upper and a lower. What portion of that is the upper?
To be determined, but essentially it would be east of the existing overlook over to an area to be determined based off of topography and drainage. So we had a preliminary walk through last week with staff, and we've walked it, we've looked at it, we've looked at the topo. At some point, it's going to need to split, somewhere, and so that will all be part of that engineering analysis. But a relatively short upper section, we think, and probably more along the lower bank area.
Yeah,
And there may be a mid bank that's required.
What's the length of this piece?
5,100 linear feet approximately.
Under a mile.
Yeah, what are the deliverables for a concept plan like this? In other words, what do we receive in the end?
You'll receive basically a final concept study. It won't be, a full-blown engineering. That will be required at a later time to actually move forward with a biddable project. But it will be a comprehensive concept study that goes through all of those elements that we just identified.
And presents rough cost
That's right,
estimates for
as
construction?
well as potential phasing, because there may be, this may be something that EIC wants to fund in phases, based off of where that probable estimate of cost comes out.
Gotcha. Is any of the land surveying or anything like that take place at this time, at concept plan phase, or is that later?
Probably not. We may be able to do some preliminary work in regards to some easement elements in areas where we know we'll have to get easements, and so we may be able to begin to start some of that work, but we don't necessarily want to launch off on survey work until we've been able to garner a little bit more input from you all and certainly City Council based off the costs and the engineering.
And will this include any conversations with some of those landowners along the way to just gauge their interest, I guess?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I believe so. You know, we've had some preliminary conversations already, and certainly it's been percolating out there since this was added to the master plan, but we'll start to dig into some additional conversations with them.
Thank you.
Do you know what the extra cost would be to have engineering look at this at the same time?
Well, we're gonna have basically a civil and a structural engineer that'll be looking at this, but they're not gonna launch off until we've got a better idea of what the alignment is. They're not necessarily gonna launch off into full-blown engineering construction documents.
But what will engineering run for something like this? Do you have an idea?
I don't know that we know until we can complete the concept study. John, I don't know if you feel comfortable even giving a,
For the design, the estimate, well, I'm thinking right now that the construction cost is in the $2 million range, so
Yeah.
the design fee would be under 200,000.
That's about right.
in the.
I mean, there's no question this is gonna be the most expensive segment of the trail we've constructed. I mean, just because of the topography, and, you know, on
Yeah,
a
the
per
cost
foot
to do
basis.
all this is
It's gonna be
big.
pretty
But it's
challenging.
also the most critical. It ties in all of our, it ties the loop, it brings in all of our businesses. So it's just, it's an important, very important segment of the trail. They're all important, but I think this one's gonna be critical for the long term.
As an order of magnitude, I believe our last engineering contract for the Shriner extension was 140, 145.
So the
So it
same,
gives you an idea
Yeah.
roughly.
so 200,000 makes sense,
Maybe, yeah.
maybe. Not
Maybe
Cool.
for EA or maybe for John, but do we think FEMA is on board for these kind of strange cantilevered, you know, human walk paths in a floodway and stuff like that? We think that's okay?
You know, they've certainly been done in other areas. You know, I think the difference in this one is that this is an area that has constant flow versus, you know, a static lake or a lake that just goes up and down. And so it's going to be a piece we're going to have a conversation about and make sure we can do it safely.
So the question to EIC then is, do we want to do this on December 21st, or do we want to postpone it to our January meeting?
Yes, sir.
Does anybody have any strong feelings about not meeting in December?
Not going anywhere,
No one's going anywhere.
Canceled my trip, so I'll be here.
so.
What
Looks
about a
like,
week earlier?
does it matter when in December we meet, as long as it's that date or earlier?
We didn't have the specific agenda item about changing the regular meeting. Mike, do you want to provide input on?
No, they don't need that.
Okay.
It's a council requirement. If you all want to change the meeting 2 weeks earlier, that's fine.
The 14th?
I mean, we'll just post it for that date.
Anybody have any objection to that date?
Nope.
I
December
don't,
14th,
It's fine.
4
No
p.m.?
objection.
You'd like for us to develop a funding agreement and set a public hearing date for the 14th? Okay, and also.
is that all right with staff? I mean, can y'all get that
We'll make it happen.
done in time? And
Yeah, we've got some models. I mean, this isn't the first time we've done feasibility analysis with EIC, so.
okay.
Just to be clear, this is just for the study to come back with all the engineering and feasibility data and cost, a rough estimate of cost.
Preliminary engineering, yes. sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Sounds good.
okay. So you'll need to take action on that to right direction to.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have item 6 on the agenda is executive session, which I think, Mr. Hoppy, you said we don't need to do.
Do need action?
You'll need to take an action item.
Okay.
Oh.
For that, to set that.
Okay.
10 days of notice on the funding agreement.
Can I get a motion to release staff to prepare that funding agreement and public hearing for December 14th?
I move.
A second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Passes unanimously. All right, on the executive session item, Mr. Hoppy, we don't need to address that, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, anybody have any items for future agenda or announcements?
So we're not doing executive session?
Because we don't need to.
That's fine. I saw it on there. I couldn't figure out what it was.
Okay.
Good.
All right, if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned at 4:59.